Hello, I'm Arthur Black. Welcome to Weird Homes, a show that looks at the most unusual and bizarre homes in North America. You think the fellow that lives here is just a wee bit obsessive? Well, he's in good company. Wait till you see the homes I've lined up for you this time. One of them is full of trains. Actually, an entire working railroad, inside and out. Then there's Tubby Brown's place, stuffed to the rafters. We'll also drop in on a house that's a shrine to an opera superstar, Enrico Caruso. This place has everything from his carpet slippers to his death mask. A little obsessive? Oh yeah, let's take a look. George and Margaret Carlson have a serious case of railroad fever. You might say they're in training. And Tubby Brown? He and his wife Betty make angels in the kitchen. Then there's Aldo Mancusi, preserving music you can tap your toes to. Residents of the Pacific Northwest have had a long-standing love affair with trains. And nobody more than George and Margaret Carlson. But their love of the railways is way over the top. In fact, they've kind of gone off the rails. They've turned their home into a model railroader's dream come true.
George had never had a train from when he was a boy, and he always thought he'd like to have a model train. At Christmas time that year, I went to the local hobby shop and I purchased those 2 White Pass Yukon engines and 3 cars and just enough track to set it on. Well, he was so happy and so pleased. The day after Christmas, he went to the local hobby shop and he bought enough track to go around our dining room table on the floor. That's how it started.
You know how it goes. A boxcar here, a model farmhouse there. Pretty soon the Carlsons had a whole miniature world in their backyard. All of it crisscrossed with railroad tracks. So Margaret, who's the architect and who's the engineer?
I do the buildings and the people, and George runs the trains. And I have gotten into decorating the scenes and making specialty cars. And that's my part.
Little things like that, honey.
Well, the train didn't even stop at the station this time.
Oh.
It wasn't just a case of laying out some track and plopping down some buildings. Believe it or not, this was once an ordinary backyard. Then one day, when Margaret was out, George did a little landscaping.
I went to work one day and I came home. There wasn't anything in this yard. There wasn't a leaf, a limb, a root ball, nothing. They were all gone. My husband had brought some help in and they cut the trees down. I was absolutely amazed. And the next day, they started in with moving dirt.
Truckloads of dirt and 200 tons of rock. But they didn't take the pattern out of any model railroad book. They took it from their own memories.
We spent a lot of time in Alaska, and so we have a floating fish camp, which you see in southeastern Alaska a lot. There's a lot of lumber and a lot of logging, so we do have that represented here. Float planes, which there are many float planes in Alaska. Little cabins with a shingle mill on the other side. Just a number of things.
George and Margaret belong to a garden railway society. Each year, they hold an open house for the 180 club members. Someone who drops in more often is their friend, Alfred Robinson.
This is one of the greatest backyards that we have in the Pacific Northwest. And what's really neat about it is it's so natural. You would never believe that this was once a wooded area. You come in here and you say, oh, well, this must have been natural, and they just put a few buildings around. But no, everything here has been put in and planned by George and Margaret. And what amazes me is the amount of water that flows here. It's just neat to have friends like George and Margaret who are so willing to share it with everyone, and that's the important thing.
If you think the Carlsons' yard is an eyeful, wait till you see their basement. It's actually their workshop, a railway yard in miniature.
We used to call this the train office because it has the vault and all, and so many people would come in the door and turn around the corner and look in here and say, "Oh my God!" So we have now renamed this the "Oh my God" room.
The Oh My God room contains dozens of trains and hundreds of feet of track, and a couple of surprises as well.
That goes outside to the outside. There's a tunnel that goes out, and then there's another one that comes in. In the very beginning, you had to pick them up and take them outside, and you just don't do it. Where this way, if you just want to go mess around for half an hour, you run them out, and you can run them back in.
I can't tell you how many of anything we have. I think there's about 60 engines, and there are just dozens of cars. I really don't know how many we have.
One year, we were going to a convention in Orlando, and I got a lecture on the airplane all the way across the country. We don't need to buy anything. We don't need to buy anything. We got stuff we've never uncrated. She walked into the convention hall, and there was an engine there, and she says, "Oh, we gotta have one of those."
Before they retired, George was a boat builder and Margaret an accountant. Now that their working days are over, they say they're happily spending their children's inheritance on their obsession. But what happens when there's no more room in the backyard or the basement? George and Margaret have an answer for that, too.
We've purchased a house next door and have already put trains into the basement there, and we're going to put a layout in the backyard there too, and it will all be raised up off the ground, because as you get older, your knees get tougher and it gets harder and harder to get up.
Well, the joints might not be as spry as they were, but the Carlson imagination is chugging full steam ahead. Hats off to the railroad and Carlsons. With a whole new property to develop, who knows what the next stop down the line might be. Welcome to the outskirts of Jefferson, Georgia, and the home of Tubby and Betty Brown. You'll like these two. Come on in, they're probably around the back. Whoa! Watch your step. Careful now. It's a little cluttered as yards go, but there's a good reason for that. This is not junk, it's raw material. Creative supplies for a folk artist who goes by the name of Tubby.
This is my yard here. I'm a little bit ashamed of it because I got so much junk and stuff, but that's my material I work with. And I got to go to the junkyard and pick up stuff and bring it home and set it around for a year or two and then use it. I see something like this as a chicken head or a bird head or something like this. His eyes and his beak. And I've got more junk than I know what to do with, really. I made these out of some old chicken feeders I bought. Found a man that had some, and he said, "Yeah, I got a few down there and I'd sell." I said, "What do you want for them?" He said, "Oh, I'll take $1 a piece." I said, "I'll take all you got." He found me 100. He found me 100. And I couldn't hardly pay for them, but I bought them.
Over the years, Tubby's bought a few things that he didn't have an immediate use for. And it isn't all out in the yard. Tubby's art supplies have invaded the house, to the point that there's hardly room to swing a cat in here.
Usually every Saturday morning he gets up and goes to yard sales. And that's the reason our house is so full. He just buys anything and everything.
My daughter said the other day, says, you'll buy anything. I said, it's my money, I'm gonna buy what I want to.
And what Tubby buys, he eventually turns into folk art. So much folk art, he's running out of room. In the Brown house, just finding a place to work can be a problem.
Got what I call a studio. I've made it to paint in. And I've got it so full now I can't get in there and paint, so I paint outside, inside, everywhere.
We have a mess every day in this house. I just keep a path to walk through. That's all we've got. I told the preacher one time I had a path just to walk through. He didn't believe me till he came up here to see. He said, you were telling the truth, and I thought you was exaggerating. But we've been married for a long time. I think I'll just keep him anyway.
Tubby and Betty ran a convenience store for 35 years. When they retired, Tubby turned to folk art, and Betty helped him out. Tubby gets inspiration from Bible stories, everything from Noah's Ark to Daniel in the lion's den.
This is a devil's liquor bottle. The Jonah and the whale, I've been making them for a long time. I made a lot of different varieties of them. And this is a little circus. It's made like the one I had when I was a little kid, 4 or 5 years old. And I'm 72, so it's pretty old. This is the devil's hot tub. I figured that the devil, he puts you in the hot tub to get you used to the heat before he really puts you in the hot stuff.
Tubby's always got something on the go. And Betty? Well, she gets to deal with the side effects of living with a 72-year-old creative dynamo.
You just can't clean house, you can't move, you can't have friends in, but we live in it. So anybody can come in that wants to. They just have to accept it like it is, because I sure can't change it. In this room, it used to be a bedroom, but the bed is so cluttered nobody can see it. So now my grandchildren don't have a place to sleep when they come to visit. This is a she-devil made out of driftwood. It's one of the first pieces Tubby made, and he will not sell it. Next, we'll go into the most cluttered room you'll see. It was the dining room, but it's a stock room. Along with a lot of pottery, it does have a lot of work in it, too. And this is a dollhouse that Tubby made several years ago, and we just keep it. Everybody that comes loves to see it.
The man can't help it. He's a folk artist, and his work fills up just about every nook and cranny in the home. Only place they can find some elbow room is on the porch. Tubby, when it comes to folk art, would it be fair to say you're a bit of an addict?
It's addiction. Yeah, you just get started, you can't stop. Finding junk.
He's in a rut, and he's gonna stay in that rut. Now just let him be. As long as he's happy, that's the main thing.
You never know where you're going to find a magnificent obsession. Take this unpretentious house in Brooklyn, New York. Aldo Mancusi and his wife live on the first floor, but on the second floor...
Hi, how are you?
Fine.
Come right in, find yourself a chair.
Aldo Mancusi sharing his lifelong passion with some visitors. It's an extraordinary collection of memorabilia about one of the greatest opera singers of all time, Enrico Caruso.
And these are his shoes. So these are dress clothing when he dressed and went out to dinner or whatever. And he was very elegantly dressed all the time, you know. And here we have not only pictures of Caruso, but we also have his postcards, which here you see dated from 1900, which were sent to his mistress back in Italy. This is in the opera Aida, and this is Manon.
Aldo has been collecting Caruso artifacts for over 35 years, and he's opened his home to the public for the last 10.
And we're going to see a nice movie on Caruso, and
the fans flock in. Aldo, how many visitors have passed through the doors of your museum?
well, it's hard to say really, but I would estimate between 10 and 15,000 people over the many years that I've been displaying my collection. And that's 10 or 15,000 people who are closer to Caruso.
Aldo was inspired by his parents' love of music. His dad loved opera. His mother sang arias for visitors. As for Caruso, Aldo thinks the poor boy from Naples is the greatest gift Italy ever gave North America.
Caruso, as a man, has done so much for the Italian community. When Caruso got here, the Metropolitan Opera House positively plastered his name all over the place. Every time he sang, he filled the Metropolitan Opera House.
And at 72, after a lifetime of studying the king of tenors, there isn't much about Caruso that Aldo Mancusi doesn't know.
These are records, extremely rare records of Caruso. These were done in 1903 by the Anglo-Italian Commerce Company. Here we have a picture of Caruso in Sorrento on a record, and this perhaps was the last picture of Caruso.
When he started out, Caruso would sing for less than $20 a week. At the peak of his fame, he received $15,000 for a single performance. Caruso was the first opera superstar.
And here we have programs of his first appearance or his debut in the Metropolitan Opera House, where on November 23rd, 1903, he debuted in the opera Rigoletto. So this is the first appearance of Caruso in America. Here we have Caruso's costume, which is a beautiful costume which he wore during the opera.
Caruso was more than the world's greatest singer. He was also an artist with pen and ink. He loved to draw caricatures of himself, his friends, and associates.
This is a caricature of Dr. Stella, his very personal physician, who actually saved his life here in New York in 1920. And this is autographed, and the date was put there by Caruso. And I suppose the caricature was done prior to his bill, because his bill from Dr. Stella was some $15,850. Yes, and that kind of money was an awful lot of money then, and when Caruso complained about it, he removed the $850 and gladly paid him $15,000.
Still a lot of money. But as for Aldo's collection of Caruso memorabilia, priceless. Aldo's collected Caruso memorabilia right up to the day the great man died, literally.
And in those years, it was commonplace to do death masks of famous artists or musicians. There are only 3 in the world, by the way. One is here, one is in the museum in Milano, and the other lies in the hands of his son in Italy. So we're very fortunate to have this, although it's sad, but nevertheless, it is the exact moment of his passing.
Aldo's fascination with Caruso made him appreciate another musical legacy: antique instruments. He's restored many of these rare beauties with his own hands.
I always say this about myself, that I was born at the wrong time, because, you see, I could fix all of these machines, and I can fix cars of this era. But today, I can't fix a CD, I can't fix a car today, and so I feel that my mechanical ability allows me to stay in the era that I wish to stay in.
Aldo's pride and joy, this Mills Troubadour jukebox from 1927.
Let's put a slug into this machine. hopefully, we will get Caruso singing
Aldo's love of artifacts extends to his Model A Ford. He thinks the people who gave us cars like this were great artists too.
Well, I marvel at the artisans of the past because their expertise and their ability to put things together in such a magnificent way. Rebuilding a piece of old equipment to me is a joy because it actually means that the equipment will be around for another 100 years. So future generations will enjoy the very same instruments that I have shown in the museum.
It's not easy running a one-man museum, but Aldo Mancusi says the object of his affection makes it worthwhile. They just don't make tenors like Caruso anymore.
When I hear tenors of today, I say, but this man can't sing. There is something lacking there. And I think it's the era itself. Because Caruso never concerned himself with money, always concerned himself with his profession, to be perfect or better than perfect.
Whatever turns your wheels, whether it's model trains in the basement, homemade angels at the kitchen table, or music by angels of the past, it all amounts to the same thing: magnificent obsessions. And coming up on the inside, it's buttermilk. It's buttermilk by my nose. It's buttermilk by my head. It's buttermilk. I guess you know when the tourists start popping by your home, your hobby has definitely turned into an obsession. That's okay, long as they don't stay for dinner. I'm Arthur Black. I hope you enjoyed Weird Homes. We'll see you next time.